Bright and early again. I was going to do, like, finish off the couple bits I had on the rear bar, but I think I'm better off tackling the front because that's probably more of a most of the day job, and the jobs on the back are only a couple of hours, so I can just do them after work or whatever. So yeah, I'll roll the front end out this morning. Shouldn't take that long to roll it out, I guess. Yeah, drag link, panard, the shocks, the brake line, the locker line, and yeah, just undo the tail shaft and then undo the, because I've got hybrid arms, just undo the 2 bolts, slide the bolt out, and it should be able to roll the whole front out. So that's the plan. Pull it out, and then I'll probably set it here somewhere and yeah, strip it down. Obviously I've got to brace it, just the axle tube, and then swap the lockers over to the other center and then put it all back together. So we'll get stuck into that. I see it quite a bit on Facebook, people asking how to pop the tapered ends out. So all you need to do is undo this bottom nut, obviously. Sometimes if it's not locked into the taper good enough, the whole ball joint spins and this nut won't undo, so it all spins. So you need to sort of like get a bar or something and put downward pressure onto it to lock it into the taper and then undo it at the same time. It doesn't happen, if maybe you got standard arms in it and they've been in there for bloody 20 years, 30 years, yeah, that can be a problem. But if you've swapped them out a couple of times, it's generally not a problem. Just, yeah, rattle that off. And then I also see a lot of people trying to flog it from underneath, and it either wrecks the threads or they leave the nut on there and bash it with the nut on to try and pop it, and then it can also wreck the nut and the thread. So bigger hammer you can find and flog it on the end like that, and it should pop it off. But I'll see how we go. I'll see if I can do this one-handed. That 2 big hits and pops right off. I hadn't actually touched that, so that was surprising, come off that easy. But yeah, usually they're somewhat basically that easy. Which is also scary, I have seen on Facebook before, where'd it go? That people reckon that the split pin holds the nut on. So yeah, so I've seen people actually say you just nip the nut up and put this, like, back it off until it lines up and then put the split pin in. That's scary that you're sharing the roads with people like that. They're locked into a taper, so crank this one up and then put the split pin in. So the split pin's only there to help it stop coming loose, not to hold the whole thing in. So yeah, that's a bit of a scary thought. Crank them up. And another thing, don't forget that the GQ and the GU have different tapers in here. They're a different tapered ball joint, so you can't mix and match. If you have a GU front in a GQ car, you obviously need a GU rod end. So that's why people go to GU steering boxes as well, which is, yeah, they're obviously better, but they're the same taper either end. So yeah, you don't get mixed up, drag link put in backwards with the wrong tapers and whatever. They're not that much different, but they are different. So that's one thing to remember. Yeah, if you're putting GU stuff in, obviously run with the GU rod ends. Sometimes you forget how easy it is to pull the diffs out. That, like, half an hour and it's out. So the hybrid arms make it even easier because you don't have a stupid bloody mushroom bush with a pin at the end. Yeah, just undo the bolts and drop the diff out, and yeah, like brake line, locker line, breather, the panard, drag link, the shocks, the springs fall out. Pretty simple. And I just tied up the drag link and panard up the top, out of the way. No need to pull them all the way off. So yeah, pretty simple. I guess now it's time to start stripping it. I do have different springs to go in. They've been sitting over there for like 3 months, but I haven't put them on yet. So they're just the same 4-inch springs, but they're like heavy duty ones. That's to compensate for the bit of extra weight from the winch. And when I ordered this suspension, like I sort of told them, I wanted it at 3-inch, and yeah, they sent me, well, they sent me 4-inch springs, but light duty ones. So yeah, it'll obviously sit at like a 3-inch height, and then 5-inch shocks. But the issue was it did ride good empty, sort of. But yeah, once it was fully loaded, it was like a big bloody boat. The spring rates are far too soft. So I've already changed the rear. I changed them ages ago. And then I haven't had a chance to change the front, which yeah, I'm obviously going to do now, because the bow and winch and that should be going on pretty soon. So I'm looking forward to that. And obviously the shocks, the valving's pretty close. If I was going to keep them, probably now is when I'd be pulling them down and re-shimming them. They probably need to be a bit more heavier in their compression dampening, and need a bit more rebound dampening as well, to stop it sort of bouncing around. Not much, it's pretty close. The shocks are awesome, they're just Superior 2.0s, but obviously we're on to bigger and better things here, because the car is pretty heavy and I do like to drive fast. So yeah, I want a bigger shock and a bit more tunability with it. So I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, yeah, I'll bloody get this diff out of the way and put on some jack stands and pull it apart. Not an enjoyable job, but yeah, it's fully stripped, obviously covered up some stuff. So it's back to a bare housing, and yeah, I've got to brace it obviously. So housing's on the bench. It's surprising how light they are with nothing on it. So that's easy to lift around and that. But yeah, the center's obviously here. That's a 4.1, so I've got a 4.6 on the shelf, and I'll just be swapping that locker over. But I've already had a locker in the other one, so I don't need to drill holes or anything. They should just go straight in. Pretty straightforward. Yeah, that'd be easy enough. And yeah, obviously you just got a brace axle tube on this one, and then I've got the pumpkin bloody brace on the front to do. And then, yeah, put it all back together. I've got the rebuild kit and that for it. And then I think I've got to go into town and get some bearing grease, because I haven't got that. And probably brake clean as well. So anyway, I'll get into it. I'm no Boilermaker by any means, but what I've done is, like, that's just sitting on there. I haven't welded that at all. But what I've done is just welded, yeah, the ends of the diff to the bench. And I've got a prop in the center, and then I sort of pried this down to put a bit of load on it, and then welded it to the bench also. Yeah, that's sort of just to hold it straight. Obviously, yeah, if you fully welded that out, you'd peel the diff up, and that's obviously diff done, like it's ruined then. So yeah, what I've done is, yeah, just braced either end, and then I'm not going to fully weld it, I'll just stitch it on, because it doesn't need to be fully welded. And yeah, this should, in theory, keep the diff from moving any direction. So yeah, pretty much all I've got to do now is I'll weld that on, weld the front on, and then while it's cooling down, I'll duck into town and get some bits. All right, so it's painted up. I also braced the front, which that's like just a pumpkin brace. It's where your crown wheel runs in the diff. So it's sort of, yeah, you don't want to smash the front in and then have the diff hitting the crown wheel. So that's what that's for on the front. So now, yeah, the diff now has a full brace kit. Before I just had the knuckles and a bit of other stuff. But anyway, it's ready to go back together. So of course I've got a kit here, and it came from Roadrunner Off-Road, where I buy everything. So they usually have stock on everything, and yeah, real fast shipping and things like that. So in the box we've got pretty much everything in the front end. So bigger wheel bearings, smaller wheel bearings, the needle rollers in the spindle, kingpin bearings, the back of the bearing housing seal, axle seals, swivel hub seals, wiper seals, and then I believe these seals actually go on the spindle here. So full kit. The one thing I'm not going to use in this kit is the axle seals. I've had good success using these trail gear axle seals. Obviously, yeah, Roadrunner Off-Road supply them, and I've had better success with them, and so have a lot of other people. So I now just run them. I have for a couple of years now. Every time the CV or whatever comes out, bang a new set of them in, and haven't had a drama. So I'm gonna be surprised if I finish this today, changing the kingpin bearings and the spindle bearings and seal and things like that. Like, yeah, it's already mid-afternoon, so I think it's either going to be a late night or this is going to carry on to another day. But anyway, we'll get cracking and see how far we get. So my cousin just came around and he gave me the hot tip on how to get these kingpin races out. So I've just welded like a ring around the inside, as you can see. It shrinks the bearing race, and then you can, like, I've just levered this lever in there and just banged on the end of it with a hammer and just gone around like that, and then just yeah, they pop out. So not bad way of doing it, especially on these with these little base caps in them. I don't think any other, like Land Cruiser or whatever, I don't think they run them, but anyway, they're in there for a reason, and it sort of helps separate all the grease. And if you end up with like a bit of water in your kingpin, won't seep into the CV or whatever. So anyway, they're there for a reason, and like it's easy enough just to punch the bearing races out from the back side, but you wreck these little things. So not bad little trick if you've got a welder, and yeah, not too hard. Been about 10 minutes, I've got 2 out, so I'll flip it over to the other 2. Also, while I'm at it, it's a little bit tricky. I haven't been playing around too long, but yeah, it's a little bit tricky if you don't have the right tools to get the bearing off the actual little kingpin plate. So yeah, like if you don't have like one of them sandwich or gear pullers, I suppose, where they sandwich together with a taper on it to peel the bearing off, yeah, it can be a bit tricky. I don't have one the right size, and it's like Sunday afternoon, so nothing's open. So what I've done is just welded up 3 bits of angle iron, and they sit underneath the bearing, between the bearing and this and that face there. You can see that lip. That's how much room you got to play with. So yeah, all I've done is just made up that little frame, sit it in the vise, and then just punch it out. So get a nice big punch with a big hammer and a couple knocks, and comes out. So another little hot tip for you, because yeah, that's a little bit tricky. So one thing I always do before installing the diff, especially the front, the rear is not as painful, but I always test the locker. So it takes 5 minutes to set it up, hook up the airline, turn the compressor on and just leave it on, and just, yeah, while I prepare everything else, I'll just leave it on. Turn the tail shaft, turn the axles, just make sure it's all working, because yeah, like I said, especially the front, you'd hate to have it all in, hook it up, and you know, you've done something silly like peeled the seal over or putting the seal housing on or something silly like that. Yeah, so that's a good little trick, is just test it before you put it in. I know a few people have run into dramas not testing them and then they leak. So yeah, pays to do that. All right, well, I think I'm done for the day. The center's in the housing, the knuckles are on, but the next bit is re-greasing the CVs and putting them in, and I don't feel like getting bloody greasy this late at night on a Sunday, so I'm going to do that tomorrow. And then yeah, got to put new needle rollers in the spindles, new seals on the back, and new wheel bearings, and put it all back together, roll it under, and that'll be Mickey Mouse. So I will continue this tomorrow after work. And also forgot to mention earlier, the brace kit came from Roadrunner Off-Road as well, along with the wheel bearing and silver hub rebuild kit. So yeah, before people message me asking where I got that, so yeah, it all comes from Roadrunner Off-Road. But yeah, we'll check back in tomorrow night after work. So it's been a bit longer than I expected since I've been in here, but yeah, I did end up tinkering away and put that all back together. So yeah, repack the CVs, put them in and whatever, repack new wheel bearings and, you know, put it all back together. So that's not really that fun. So I didn't film any of it because it's also a dirty job and I didn't want to touch the camera with dirty hands. So yeah, that's all back together. It's only just held in by the bolt at the end. I haven't actually done anything else. So that's today's job, to put this back together. That'll only take an hour or so. Bleed the brakes. I've got to check the bump stop clearance because of the axle tube brace. Bump stop, the axle tube to the sump clearance, which I know is going to be plenty, but it doesn't hurt to check while I'm here. Got the new front springs going in and a couple other bits and pieces. One thing I did want to show you is this. So when you put the front end back together, I have seen this multiple times. There is obviously this stepped ring, which the inner drive gear sits in, but there's also a egg ring, if you can see that, that sits hard down on the outer bearing cup race, whatever you want to call it. So the egg ring sits in there, and what that does is essentially space this ring to the correct spot, so then the drive gear can sit in the correct spot for the hub engagement. So I've seen that a few times where someone's forgotten this egg ring and this stepped ring ends up sliding all the way in, and then the hub drive gear slides all the way in as well, and then you've got no hub engagement. So that's one little trick. And another thing that I do is now when I pack wheel bearings, I actually use this. It's just a grease needle, and yeah, got a grease gun that sits in the shed, and yeah, sometimes it's got bearing grease in it, sometimes it's got CV grease in it. So yeah, I use it for everything. Yeah, greasing up the bearings and CVs and that. So, and it's easy because on the back side of this, because it's obviously got a seal in there, instead of popping the seal out to pop the bearing out to re-grease them, like if you have it apart, yeah, I just bang the needle on, and you can put the needle in between the rollers. You can slip it in each spot and pack your bearing, and your hands stay pretty clean. And yeah, obviously the same with the CV. You can put it in behind the CV and fill it with grease and that. So little hot tip, just buy a cheap grease gun, get a little grease needle, and yeah, it's easy to re-grease everything then when it's apart. So, and what I'm actually doing with this is I'm going to carry this as a spare in the car. So I already carry wheel bearings and a hub, like a manual, the lock and hub. So what I'm actually going to do is put this all together with a hub on it, and then wheel nuts and whatever. So yeah, if you, which I've done before, blow a CV out and it blows the end of the stub out, or you've done a wheel bearing, which I haven't done for like 8 years or something since the last time I've done a wheel bearing, but it does happen occasionally. So yeah, if you're in the middle of nowhere, that's the idea. Just carry all this as a spare, and then yeah, you do a wheel bearing or anything like that, you can just pull it all off and then just put new stuff on. Because yeah, obviously, even if you do a wheel bearing, it wrecks all this, can wreck the thread. So there's all sorts of things that can go on. So the only sort of extra bit of room is this. It takes up a bit more room, but I'm sure I can manage to find a spot for it. So a little bit handy to have, especially on the longer trips when you're in the middle of nowhere. All right, so I'm just checking the bump stop clearance, and as you can see, hopefully you can see that, there's still like 100 mil between the diff and the sump, which is fine. And I did notice
another thing, the front pumpkin brace, I don't know if you can see that in there, onto the panhard. There's not much clearance there, so there's only like a couple mil actually, which is something that I forgot to take into consideration. But anyway, there is clearance there, that's all that matters. Yeah, just probably wouldn't want to be pushing the diff any further forward, but that's fine because it's in a good spot. If anything, the diff probably needs to go back a little bit, but that's fine. I do see a lot of things on Facebook about how to set up your bump stops. That's pretty much how you do it. Put the shock in and then space the bump stop. See, we've got about 50 mil left on the shaft, and the bump stop is not quite fully collapsed, but near enough to it. But I will do a big video on suspension when I put the new front shocks in, so stay tuned for that. All right, well, that's job done. It's back on its wheels, and obviously all looks good, all painted up. One thing to remember whenever you're doing suspension bolts and anything up is the bushes, anything that's got a moving bush in it, so the end of the radius arm, if you've got the hybrid arms, the control arms, the panhards, anything like that, you've got to do them up when it's at ride height. So that obviously is the most common spot for it to sit. So if you have the suspension at full droop and you crank the bolts up and then you put it back to ride height, it's going to have sort of tension binding that bush up already. So make sure that, yeah, anything you do to that, always do it up at ride height. And another thing is, if you have adjustable panhards, adjust it to length and then put it on the car, and then because the angles aren't the same between the chassis mount and the diff mount, so the panhard's actually got to be slightly offset when you lift the car. So yeah, same thing, ride height and then crank the adjuster nuts up. Make sure you do that. I do have the 31s on for a reason, because it's going to the panel beaters, but also I had to change the front hubs, and the old Linglings are getting the centerboard machined out. It's only like 2 mil or something like that, but yeah, the early Linglings didn't have the correct centerboard, which is fine. I've been managing since, just doing something that I shouldn't be doing, but yeah, now they're getting machined out. So the 31s are on for the panel beater, and so I can get the centerboard machined out for them. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up today. I was going to do a shed skid, but I think I'll wait for the next week's video. You might get a shed skid in that, so I've still got to pull the rebar off on that, but that'll be next week's video. And yeah, like I said, when I get the front shocks, I'll do a big bloody thing on suspension and how to set it up. But yeah, next video I might see a bit on the 80 as well, because that's in the shed and he's doing some pretty cool stuff to that. But I've got to apologise for making this video so long. I can see how much footage I've already filmed, and this video is going to be probably excessively long, longer than I'd like, but it is what it is. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did make it to the end, you are appreciated. Even drop a comment if you've made it to the end to let me know that people actually watch them all the way to the end. So yeah, other than that, make sure you subscribe if you're a new viewer, and I keep saying this every video, hopefully this car's back out in the bloody track soon, but until then, we'll catch you on the next one.